Hi there, my name is Jackie. Like you, I care about my students, and I care about how much students understand and retain from a lesson. That's why I want to talk to you about stories and why they are important in language education. Humans are storytelling animals. We are hardwired for narrative. Students, regardless of their attention span, will sit with rapt attention through a good story. Yet stories serve more than just amusement. They have profound implications for education. Everyone finds stories more interesting, easier to understand, and easier to remember than exposition and argument. Stories captivate our attention, accelerate comprehension, and enhance recall. To appreciate these advantages, we need to understand the elements of a story. Let's take a look together. Professional storytellers identify four key elements, often called the 4 C's. These include causality, conflict, complications, and character. Causality establishes a link between events. Conflict introduces a goal and hurdles for the central character. Complications arise as efforts to eliminate the obstacles create new challenges. And character development reveals personality, depth, and motivations that propel a character through a story. Let's remember the 4 C's as we look at how stories engage learners, facilitate comprehension, and facilitate recall. Stories captivate our attention better than other kinds of text. Why? Stories encompass themes of intrinsic interest, such as romance, sex, violence, success, and failure. These are topics that people are naturally drawn to. Ears perk up when these topics are introduced. Researchers have found that language learners much prefer discussions on topics related to personal growth stories and dramatic events even more than discussions about current affairs and moral controversies. Also, research has shown that stories are more engrossing, absorbing more of a reader's attention than other types of text. In an experiment, participants reading stories took longer to respond to distractions than when they were reading exposition. The research team interpreted the delays in response time as indicating greater engagement. Stories are also easier to understand. Researchers have found that people are able to read stories more quickly than expository text because of the causal connections between ideas. When you read a story, you think to yourself, why did that happen? You automatically think about cause and effect. Often one event will be related by causality to a prior event in the story. Other times, the event occurs because of the character's central goal. In stories, one thing causes the next. The audience is able to use this inherent causal structure of stories to infer meaning in ways that they can't with other kinds of texts. Character and causality make stories more comprehensible. The same researchers found that stories were much easier to remember. When the same information was presented to participants in an experiment as part of a narrative or in expository form, participants remembered about 50% more from the stories than from the expository passages. The reason is due to the way stories make you draw inferences. Throughout a story, you ask yourself, why did that happen? What's going to happen next? Thinking carefully about how new information is connected to the rest of the story makes it more memorable. What's more, the inferences required to understand how events in a story are connected are neither trivially easy nor overwhelmingly difficult. Research reveals that the inferences we draw when exposed to narratives are only moderately difficult, which is the optimal level of difficulty for our brains. In other words, stories work our brains at the ideal level to maintain interest without tiring us out. And because stories work our brains at the optimal level, the sustained effort of thinking further enhances memory. We are, indeed, built for stories. All of these narrative advantages can be harnessed in language education to make learning more efficient. Since stories are engaging, easy to understand, and memorable, they are the best way to learn vocabulary and grammar for students. The highly comprehensible and memorable input that stories provide builds a dynamic system of form mapped onto meaning in our brains. And telling meaningful stories makes accessing that dynamic system more efficient with every repetition. It is through stories that young children acquire all the complexities and nuances of their native language's verb system, and they do it without drilling, analysis, or boredom. Let's use storytelling and narrative writing tasks to accelerate language learning, making it more interesting, more comprehensible, and more memorable for all learners. Thanks for watching. To find out how you can use storytelling and AI to accelerate learning with your students, contact Nicholas at conversesolo.com.